many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Sorry, that connection for some reason took forever to connect. Okay. I wanted to kind of get into this whole political thing because I know that there's been a few people that I'm friends with them on Facebook. They unliked my page because I don't put what I believe is because I don't put pro-Trump stuff. I'm not a supporter of Trump. Don't expect me to support Trump, but also don't expect me to support any other candidate because I do not see any candidate up there that I support. So it's not that I'm anti any candidate. Well, there are a few that I am anti, but for the most part, I just don't see any candidate that would be beneficial. Trump, I have said on this program, I do believe he is a nationalist, not a globalist. Which many people do take that as a positive, which I do in a small little bit kind of look at that as a positive, that he's not a globalist. Now, I'm also not a nationalist. The problem with both of those is they're controlled. The globalists are trying to control things globally. The nationalists are trying to control things nationally. I'm a libertarian. Now, do I think that there's things that Trump might do that might benefit this country? Yes. I think there's things Bernie Sanders could possibly do that might benefit this country, but all those are short term. They turn around and bite you in the butt later down the road. And really, long run, there's just not a positive that I see. We look at, everything under Obama. He Obamacare and all these circumstances we find ourselves in overseas with Libya, Egypt, Syria. It just, there's no end. But we also have to remember a lot of this was started by Republicans. We always talk about what the Democrats are doing, what Obama's doing, and all the money they spend. Well, Ron Paul put out a Ron Paul Liberty report talking about, Republicans are known for being big spenders. And it was funny because a lot of things that you'll never hear from the right is our military spending. We don't cut our military spending. Even Trump, build the military up. We already, have a large military. It's not been shrunk. The thing is, a lot of it's went towards technology rather than more troops. So it's one of those things that you have to look at how they're doing things. If you look at all these countries that seem to have our involvement in some form or fashion, they're decimating those countries. Those countries aren't as a national, controlled government, controlled country with a large military. Well, no, it'll never get to the point where it will threaten us because those countries are just falling apart. But then the backside of that is we're creating these little terror type cells by being involved over in these countries. Then let's open our borders to people from those regions. And it's a snowball effect. But instead of going, we need to build walls and close our borders and build up our military, maybe we should not allow our military special, operations, these ABC, organizations being involved in these other countries the way they are. Look at how many bases we have. Look at how many, countries we're in. Let's start with the small snowball. Let's not deal with what can we do to prevent that snowball once it's built up from running us over. How about we don't create these snowballs that tend to run us over? But again, the Republicans don't talk about military cutting. And then, what Obama's done with, all these little operations, where's the anti-war left? They brought it up with the Republicans, but they're not bringing it up with Obama. But I want to go ahead and get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. Republicans are the big spenders. Does anybody care?
Tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. Today we're going to provide for the American people the answer to our budget problems and come up with a foolproof method of being able to balance our budget. Today, I believe it's the Budget Committee in the House voting on a resolution, and they have a plan. They have a plan, 10-year plan, and it's going to be balanced. But as you might guess, there's no cuts this year. I mean, we have to wait for a while for cuts. Cutting is not in the cards. But there was an article put out by the conservative organization in Washington, the Heritage Foundation. Everybody knows Heritage is, Republican, and they like fiscal conservatives, and they're complaining. They sent out an article because the budget is the big debate right now. And the article says Republicans are addicted to increasing federal spending. I don't know whether our audience will believe that or not, but I imagine a bunch of them will, that they are. But, the other side's addicted as well. But, I've just thought about this deficit, and I'm just wondering, I'm sure the statistics are out there, but if you look at the Reagan tripling the national debt and looking at Bush's debts for 8 years, I would think that it just may be that the record would show that Republicans run up the debt faster than the Democrats. But we want to talk a little bit about the fallacies. But what about the credibility of this article? Because I don't even know if they have a significant proposal. Oh yeah, they want to tinker with it a little bit and solve this problem. But do they deserve much credibility on this matter?
Well, when we first started reading this morning, we thought, okay, this is a pretty good article. Yeah, Republicans are addicted to spending, and then you look at there's a few things missing in it. First of all, you notice that it's from the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation loves government spending. They just like it spent over here on the military and running the U.S. empire. So you'll never see anything in here about the huge elephant in the room, which is massive, massive military spending that increases every year. So in a way, they're masquerading as fiscal conservatives, and they're basically just phonies.
Well, there are a couple things we ought to look at. The philosophy of government that dictates welfare, warfare spending. But the other thing is this unwritten rule in Washington that you can't touch certain parts of the budget. I want to show a chart here to show what part of the budget is up for grabs or up for criticism or up for cuts. Because the whole budget should be. I mean, why can't they cut anything? It's not like it's against the law to cut the budget. But the discretionary spending is pretty limited, for what they can tinker with. And this is what I want to show. Here we can take a look at it. There's the three big squares are, non-discretionary. You can't touch these. And the blue is Social Security, so nobody would touch that. And labor is involved there. That's over $1 trillion. And then the orange is Medicare and medical bills, and that's pretty huge. But then the military, look, that says 634, but we all know that when you look at all the military, it's even close to $1 trillion. And most of the time, the general number that people accept is 25% is discretionary. But it might be less of that because the one gray area next to the yellow area is also the interest. Mm-hmm. And the only way you could tinker with and change the interest is quit paying the Fed interest, because they loan all the money. But, if it's limited to that, how can they expect anything will be done? And Congress is going to be bickering back and forth, and here Ryan's under the gun, and he says he's always been able to pass these budgets. But this one might be a different story because there is a coalition opposing, the budget this year.
I think most people don't realize how tiny that wedge of budget that they can control, just a very tiny amount. But as you point out, the big war in Washington, Ryan's proposed budget for that little triangle is $1.07 trillion, and the hawkish House Freedom Caucus, they're the hard fiscal conservatives. Well, they want to make it from 1.07 down to 1.04 trillion.
Is the Freedom Caucus the same as the Liberty Caucus? Our Liberty Caucus, I don't think, would have taken that position.
I think they would have a little bit more than a $30 billion cut they probably would have requested. But it just shows how Washington, this is a huge war over really a drop in the bucket of
Well, somebody might ask, well, how do they get away with this? It's been long going on, and there's been conservatives all the way back in the Eisenhower era warning, Goldwater was warning about the deficit and how bad it was, but it keeps going on. And there's a couple things that happen there. One is we get to print the money for the world. We get, especially since 1971, we print the gold as the reserve currency of the world. So the Fed plays a role in this. So borrowing is not a problem. Ordinarily, a business or in other countries would run into a lot of trouble by then because there'd be a loss of confidence. But we're sort of in the driver's seat when it comes to money. But it's estimated that on the average budget, about 16% is borrowed. Some in the marketplace, but mostly from that friendly organization called the Fed. They get to do it. But can you recall, because I know you intensely listen to all the debates and all, does anybody really talk about the deficit and the concern about that? Has anybody ever mentioned that we ought to close the Fed down? But these are the two things that just seem to go on and on.
And it's interesting because in the Heritage article, he makes the interesting point that 3 out of every 4 Americans think that Congress should not increase spending. But I wonder, answering a survey that says that versus actually living in a country where the spending was cut, if Americans would really like that. And as you point out, that's where the Fed comes in as the candy man.
And that's the technical aspect of why we're able to do it. Reserve currencies, the Federal Reserve, and trust in the dollar still internationally. But, even if you avoided that problem, which you can't, the greatest danger I see from a monetary system that we have today is the fact that they finance big government. Welfare spending gets out of control, debts get out of control, warfare spending get out of control, which means government gets out of control, and government's the enemy of the people because they're always taking, an excuse for more taxation, more regulation, and more removal of our liberties. So in that sense, this to me is the great danger under these circumstances. Eventually, though, it's going to be fiscal currency crisis because this cannot be maintained. They will not be able to continue to run up these deficits. The 10-year plan to balance the budget. How many times have we heard that stuff? Well, we'll do this, but no cuts this year and no cuts next year. And there's sort of this argument that, the Republicans can't cut it. They really want to. But what will happen is they will close down the government. Yeah. The president wouldn't sign the budget. And then the Republicans would be blamed for closing down. They never have won that argument. They would always be blamed for closing down the government, yet it would be the Democrats that had to take the stand and veto the bill if it's a Democratic president.
You think that after all these years, over and over again, they would come up with a better argument to be able to deflect the blame for when the president shuts down the budget. Yeah,
and the other bigger picture on how to do this is this a technical problem or a philosophic problem? And I think it's absolutely a philosophic problem because in our early history we didn't have the welfare state that was causing the trouble, and we weren't at constant wars. So that was a little bit different. But right now we are because our philosophy of government is that everything is sacred. And this is what's so disgusting about these presidential debates is they don't even talk about that. They don't talk about real cuts, real monetary reform, dealing with the Federal Reserve, changing our foreign policy, and change the definition of entitlements. How did we get to this point where entitlements are rights? We can't deny rights to people because they have a right to this stuff, so we have to do it. And so we have embarked on something that most people who have thought about this for many years are bewildered why it lasts so long. But that just because it lasts longer than some thought, it means this subjective confidence factor has lasted. But that doesn't mean it can go on. We don't live in a new era that we can be financed permanently with this spending and borrowing and printing money and talking foreigners into taking our money. I just don't see how that's going to happen.
Yeah, nobody wants to be the bad news guy.
Yeah.
But there's another meeting today that's also very important, and it's the meeting of the of the Fed, and that really relates to what we're talking about in the budget.
Yeah, the Fed will be releasing, and everybody's just pins and needles. And, at 2 o'clock Eastern time, the announcement will come, and maybe 2 or 3 or 4 words could shift markets to the degree of billions of dollars could shift hands. If it gets hawkish and said, well, the market looks good, the economy is good, we're going to raise interest rates today and in 3 months from now, that would cause probably $1 trillion worth of shift in funds. So it's so fragile and artificial, but it is a big meeting, and it's related, to the deficit because they're responsible for the deficit and to monetize it. And you probably remember me talking to the Fed chairman over the years about it, and they would always say, well, yeah, we're right, we shouldn't be doing all this, we shouldn't be putting so much, but it's Congress's fault because they spend so much money and we have to accommodate the markets. Well, they don't have to. If you didn't have a central bank, you wouldn't have that. So the central bank is, and the whole principle of central banking is to allow governments to grow much bigger than people can afford or the country can afford, or to fight wars that we shouldn't be fighting. And but the Fed's going to be tinkering there. Once again, I don't expect a cataclysmic announcement today. There could be some surprises, but the big surprise is down the road when what they say is totally irrelevant and nobody cares and people are just leaving the dollar, and you see rampant inflation in the economy, and no matter how much they print and how much debt you run up and no matter how much Congress spends, won't make any difference. And that is likely to come, and I don't think it's way off in the distant future. But the Fed won't solve their problems today, and they're tinkering with interest rates. Overnight rates of 0.25 and 0.5, and this is a big deal. I mean, it is absurd. And then it'll be interesting. Something that would get my attention, maybe the market, would be if they brought up the subject and talked about negative interest rates. But right now, I don't think they're going to do that because they're going to talk themselves into saying, well, the economy is perking up a little bit. So that scares the stockholders because the stock market is so out of sync and so it's bloated and inflated. So if they say something like that, then they could cause the market to crash just by just a couple words.
That's incredible. Speaker Ryan's threat to House Republicans is if you don't pass this budget, we're not going to go back to regular order. We're not going to do any appropriations bills this year. And I got to thinking, well, they don't do anything about declaring war, and that they're not going to do any appropriations bills. So what are they going to do? Maybe a good idea of cutting some of the budget would be just to send them home.
That's good. But why would that be an announcement? I think maybe in the 70s, we went through all 13 appropriation bills and passed them. But I think in later years, it's routine to have an omnibus bill and pass at the end a continuing resolution, which means there's less scrutiny. I think they like it that way because they just put it in a package. It's at the end of a session, everybody wants to go home, and nobody's going to go over. There's no amendments, nothing. It's just let's continue it, and who knows what's in there. And that's where a lot of the favoritism occurs. That's when special groups, get their benefits and they get their budget. So it's not a good way to run a business. It's a horrible way to run a government too.
Yeah.
So
shrinking Congress.
Right. Anyway, I think this is a very important subject, and I predict that Daniel and I have not solved this problem. The deficits are going to continue. Hopefully we'll get people to think about it and not think in terms of partisanship, because this idea is all Obama's fault. Yeah, he's at fault for a lot, and Obamacare was a mess, but are the Republicans going to do anything about it? When Bush was in, it was an extension of medical care and prescription drugs, and Republicans have done just as much, expanding government medicine as anybody. So that's not going to happen. So people should think about this as carefully in a nonpartisan way, in a principled way. What should the role of government be? Should the role of government be to run a welfare state and to stay in perpetual war and accept this philosophy that deficits don't matter. Deficits do matter. And the unfunded liabilities is a big issue. I don't think there's too many that's running for office this year is even talking about it or concerned about it. But then there's going to be a day coming when that is going to overwhelm. And the only thing that will finally solve it is when we pick up the pieces and say there is a better plan, and the plan is out there on what to do, and that is to change the function of government. The function of government is to preserve liberty, not to tell us how to run our personal lives, not to tell the economy or run the economy by regulating the economy and being economic planners. And it's certainly, our purpose should not be to police the world and tell other countries what to do. We did all that, we could probably slash the budget by 75%, and everybody would be a lot better off. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report. You can find that at Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube or ronpaullibertyreport.com. Go check them out. Subscribe. And to kind of go along with that, you know, not only the military, but we also have to look at our monetary policy. You look at the Federal Reserve, you look at all of this. It's not sustainable. And, you know, you had Bernanke that continued to, we need to keep doing the same crap over and over. Well, Bernanke comes out and says monetary policy reaching its limits. It was even on Drudge Report. But I have it here from CNBC. Bernanke, monetary policy reaching its limits. Well, let's see what he has to say. Monetary policy in the United States and other developed countries is reaching its limits, but the Federal Reserve has not yet run out of responses to a potential slowdown, former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke wrote Friday in a blog post for the Brookings Institution. He argued a balanced monetary fiscal response would better boost the economy than monetary tools alone. Bernanke assessed policy options for the Fed, saying negative interest rates hold modest benefits but are unlikely. I assess the probability that this tool will be used in the U.S. is quite low for the foreseeable future. Nevertheless, it would probably be worthwhile for the Fed to conduct further analysis of this option, Bernanke wrote. The U.S. Central Bank this week held its target short-term interest rate range at 0.25% to 2.5%. The Fed indicated it would hike twice this year, but as rates remain below historical averages, many market watchers have wondered what the Fed could do to respond to another potential slowdown. Bernanke said the Fed could use board guidance or talking down larger term rates while convincing markets that short-term rates will remain low. If economic weakness warranted a stronger response, the Fed may consider quantitative easing. But more bond buying could spook markets and may not prove as effective as when it was used after the financial crisis, Bernanke argued. The Fed may then mule following central banks in Europe and Japan to negative interest rates. On Wednesday, Fed Chair Janet Yellen said the central bank had not actively discussed the policy move. What I would like to make clear is that this is not actively a subject that we are considering or discussing. The committee continues to feel that we are on a course where the economy is improving and inflation is moving back up, Yellen said. Bernanke said market aversion to negative rates seems overdone. He noted that policy would bring only modest benefits with manageable costs. So basically, just manipulating the same policy, using the same policy in a different way. Not changing the policy as, actually, let's try free market maybe. No. Again, it's the Fed actively manipulating. You know, you always hear people, even Donald Trump, talk about how, China manipulates their currency. What do you think we're doing here? We are manipulating our currency. Well, the Fed is. And then you have out of CSN or CNSnews.com, Social Security Administration beneficiaries top 60 million. The number of people receiving benefits from the Social Security Administration topped 60 million for the first time at the beginning of 2016. In December of 2015, according to data published by the Office of the Chief Actuary of Social Security, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance and Disability Insurance Trust Funds paid benefits to 59,963,425 beneficiaries. In January 2016, that increased to 60,084,225. And in February of 2016, it went to 60,199,914. The average monthly benefit paid per beneficiary in December was $1,228.12. In January, it was $1,229.85. In February, it was $1,230.70. The total number of beneficiaries includes retired workers and their dependents, survivors of deceased workers, and disabled workers and their dependents. In February, there were 151,074,000 people employed in either full-time or part-time jobs in the United States, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics seasonally. Adjusted employment numbers. That means 60,199,914 individuals receiving Social Security benefits during the month equaled 1 per 2.5 workers. There were 123,206 people employed full time in February, according to BLS's seasonal adjusted numbers. That equals approximately 2.05 full-time workers per each beneficiary of the Social Security Administration. Just look at these numbers. It's mind-blowing. You know, we think that we're not going to have benefits. They're spending more money than they take in half of the time, and you're just not going to be able to sustain this. And we've talked about that for years. Everybody has talked about that for years. Okay, let me go ahead and move along here. Now, I have this one from We Are Change. And this is something that people really need to kind of pay attention to, because this could potentially hurt a lot of people. But let me go ahead and cue this up. Obama's set to put in new law that could put everyone in jail. Give me a second here.
As everyone in the mainstream media and alternative media is concentrating on Donald Trump, including myself, there are important, profound changes to the American law that will retroactively change the very foundation of this country that no one is talking about. As we are speaking, President Barack Obama is set to expand the sharing of data that the NSA intercepts with other federal agencies like the FBI, the IRS, the DEA, and also local police departments in order for domestic policing. Nothing to do with terrorism, not to stop radical Islamic terrorists from actually inflicting pain onto this country, but to stop you. This is huge, important news. As we know, the NSA collects not only your text, your phone calls, your emails, your locations, your web history, your social media history, your private sexting information, but they have a complete overview of everything you do to an astonishing, surprising level. It used to be before that the NSA illegally gave information to the DEA and the IRS, and then the DEA and IRS had to build their case. They got a tip from the NSA that someone was maybe not paying their taxes or doing their taxes wrong, or if someone was smoking marijuana or doing drugs or selling drugs. The NSA would intercept that, give that information illegally. The courts could have never heard of that information, but then the IRS built their case looking for other evidence surrounding the information that the NSA gave them. This new change will allow the NSA directly to spy on you, give information to the IRS on mistakes you made on your taxes, and then the IRS will be able to persecute you on that information. To make the matter worse, retroactively, without any debate, the FBI has also just changed its use of NSA data in a move that implicates businesses and individuals alike. The FBI quietly revised its privacy rules regarding the searching of data collected by the NSA. What kind of changes did the FBI quietly and secretly make? Well, it's classified. We're not able to know that as citizens of this country, even though this will have severe, profound effects on our daily lives. Now, this is important. We have been warning you. We have been telling you. I've been screaming at the top of my lungs in 2004 that the police state apparatuses that are being set up all around us to fight terrorism will be turned against the American people, and this is exactly what's happening right now in this very moment. It's not for terrorism. It's for you. You, the American citizen that commits 3 felonies a day. You sitting right now in front of this computer, unknowingly, you have violated the federal law 3 times, and you could be in prison right now by the federal government for 21 years. 3 felonies. You could be in jail right now because of our bloated bureaucracy, because of so many laws on the books, because they are so vague and could be interpreted in so many different ways. The federal government right now could know everything you're doing and could put you in jail for 21 years. This is an absolute insane truth. This overreach of power will get so bad that when it comes to people criticizing this federal government, when it comes to people calling for accountability and transparency, these will be the first targets of this huge change that we are seeing unfold in front of us. We are already seeing with Google. This is on Google's official website. Google could predict your behavior and sell advertisers and sell you useless crap that you don't need by predicting what you have been searching by predicting what your whole web history is, what your social media interactions are, what your emails are. They take that information in their complex algorithm, give it to advertisers that will correctly predict your behavior, and then those companies, those corporate companies, could sell you more useless crap that you don't need. This is already happening now. Now imagine, this is the power that Google has with just some of the information you give them through Gmail, with Google searches, with using Google Chrome. Now imagine what the NSA has when they look at your text, your phone calls, your emails, your location, your web history, your social media, your sexting. Imagine what kind of predictive algorithms they could have about you. We're living in an absolute police state. You see that right now. Just 12 hours ago, this was on a public beach where a military-style vehicle is being used by the police to make sure that anyone, any individual who wants to have a cold beer on a sunny beach will be arrested by the police. In Chicago, an overzealous, steroided-out cop, probably, falsely arrested 130 people for drunk driving when they were not drunk driving at all. This officer, who ruined 130 people's lives illegally, is not charged and is still free. This is the type of country that we're living in, and it will only go out of control with these new laws that Obama is promising. Now, of course, you could see this happening. You could see what the FBI is doing. They are making sure that when there's a high school student who talks against the government, who is not in line with the government, who calls for accountability and transparency within our very own government, the FBI wants teachers to report him, to put him in the database, because they are potentially dangerous. In the United States, we have the government covering up and hiding documents that show how the TSA body scanners created cancer. There's no transparency. There's no oversight against federal agencies who are out of hand, who want to expand their powers. They even want to arrest the CEO of Apple in Florida by a Florida sheriff because he doesn't want to unencrypt the Apple iPhone for the FBI. And the solution here lies with Obama's very key, important statement at South by Southwest, where he had time to put down his encrypted phone long enough to tell the world to knock it off with encryption. He went to South by Southwest and he told the tech community to suck it up and let the federal government do what they want and not to use encryption. Now, encryption, it's not a bulletproof system to make sure your information is private, away from the corporations, away from illegal despotic governments that we are under. It is a preventative tool that if enough of us use, would make it virtually impossible for the federal government to spy on this. The Intercept has this important article that will be in the description below that you could click on, and you can learn how to encrypt your data. Even if you're not doing anything wrong, you could still be thrown in jail for 21 years. So I strongly recommend everyone start using encryption, start learning how to encrypt. And if all of us do it, even if we're not doing anything wrong, if enough of us use it, this will make it virtually impossible for the government to crack all of the encryption to go after all of us. It is not a bulletproof answer. It is not 100% secure, of course, but with Obama's statements, he pretty much let the solution out the door to the problem that he is creating. Check out encryption. Thank you again so much for donating with Bitcoin and donations to this independent news organization that's run for you and by you. Subscribe. We're going to have a lot more important news and information coming here your way on youtube.com/wearechange.
wearechange.org. We Are Change on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, I've talked about this for a long time, that even if they're not supposed to use it for these things, that they already are. They've been doing this, and, you know, I've pushed encryption. I've pushed things like the Tor network, VPNs. It's something that you need to take measures to secure your privacy from anybody that wants to try to use something against you, whether it be a hacker or government. And when you see that, well, they'll retroactively change things, well, then that means that what if they decide they want to make a law, make it retroactive, that you need to pay more taxes? They can go through and find out. Or let's say you sold one little item on the internet for $20. Well, now they retroactively pass some law that says anything that was sold in the last 10 years on the internet, you must pay a 50% tax on, or blah, blah, blah. And then if, they can go on and on. And again, that's why you need to secure your privacy. Then you also have dirty hackers that want to make a buck, and they can, use things against you. Now, I think eventually there will be more encrypted peer-to-peer stuff that's going to make it extremely hard. There already are. There's apps on your phone. Let's say you got an iPhone. Then you have a encryption app on top of something that doesn't save information. It transfers it, and that's it. It doesn't store anything. Things like that can prove beneficial for the freedom of people. When you have the government agencies come out and say, yeah, most people commit a felony every day, blah, blah, blah. It's just, they're things you don't know are against the law because they have so many laws. This can affect you. So, things like that, there needs to be a lot more warning when it comes to this crap, because it really has the potential to bite us all in the butt. And then you put things like that in the hands of someone that might want to become a dictator. Most people can be screwed. Okay. Let me see here which one I want to go to. I'm going to kind of bounce around a little bit. I just have some articles I really want to cover. And I know if I start getting into a rant about one thing, I'll lose it. Okay. This from the UtahStandardNews.com. News and opinion section. Utah legislator voted to hijack power of Utah sheriffs. Herbert undecided. In this legislative season of 2016, Representative Mike Knoll, Republican, introduced HB 276, the Utah Public Land Management Act. This bill was presented as a further step in getting public land returned over to the state. However, like the other transfer bills, what this bill does is much different than what its promoters said it does. Hidden inside the bill is a move to remove the ability of local sheriff to protect the people of his county and give it to the bureaucratically controlled state or regional policing agency. It has been reported on several occasions that those aspects of the Transfer of Public Lands Act and associated legislation are actually bait and switch schemes that trick us into believing we are getting our land back, but in reality we are being sold bigger government bureaucracies and unaccountable regionalism. It also appears to be a money-making scheme for the connected politicians. In a radio interview, the late Lavoy Finnegan stated, "The federal government loves the American Lands Council, chief promoters of the TPL, because what they do, they keep it in the legislative arena. They keep it in the judicial arena, the federal judicial arena. The feds, like that, because they'll never lose. They'll just keep stretching it out. They'll stretch it out for 30 years. Subverting the ranchers. Representative Ken Ivory, Republican West Jordan, has been the chief proponent of the ALC, but Representative Mike Knoll, Republican, has entered the fray in an attempt to stop the ranchers from standing up for their rights. In January 2016, ranchers in southern Utah met to discuss declaring independence from the BLM, which they see as unconstitutional. Lavoy explained that, quote, Mike Knoll and his group found out about this and they ran out there the next week saying, no, give us more time. We will get this done. Don't do that. And so it took the steam out of it. And that could have been the first full county because they have the sheriff behind them. They could have been the first whole county in the union to throw off this federal chains. Representative Knoll promised the ranchers that they needed more time to go to the legislative route. Representative Knoll did not stop at this betrayal of his constituents, and the people of Utah did those that Knoll convinced to accept the legitimacy of the BLM know that attacking the local sheriff is what he had in mind. Subverting your local sheriff. The most egregious part of this bill is its attack on the local sheriff, one of the last lines of defense against tyrannical government. On lines 337 through 339, it gives authority to an unelected bureaucrat to employ Department of Land Management, DLM, police officers who will be the primary law enforcement authority with jurisdiction on public land. The local sheriff isn't just subverted at these special times when the director of the DLM deploys the Special Regional Police Force. HB 276 states that conservation officers employed by the Division of Wildlife Resources are the primary law enforcement authority, which jurisdiction on public land to enforce the laws. Lawmakers tried to placate any fears by stating that in this bill that the law cannot be constructed as enlarging or diminishing the responsibility or authority of state-certified peace officers. However, understanding jurisdiction is important to seeing through this smokescreen. HB 276 gives primary authority to these regional policing bodies, automatically putting any local sheriff in a backseat position to defending the rights of the people on the land usurped by the government agency. And then it has the links and numbers. So that was at utahstandardnews.com. And like I say, you need to support your local sheriff and don't support legislation that tries to usurp their power, because that is unconstitutional. When you vote for your county sheriff, you're voting for the last line of defense, like it said in there. And we need to keep that in place and really vote for more freedom-loving, constitutional or libertarian-type sheriffs. I have one here from 10th Amendment Center. Alabama Senate passes bill eliminating marriage licensing. I think I had it at Truth and Media too. Let me see. think the one, I like that article a little bit better, how it was written. Yes, here we go. Here from truthandmedia.com, which I do urge everyone to go check out 10thamendmentcenter.com. When you want to nullify laws, this is one way to go. This is a more constitutional organization that promotes using the 10th Amendment. But this here from Truth and Media, Alabama Senate passes bill to abolish marriage license. The Alabama Senate passed a revived version of a bill on Tuesday with a 23-3 vote that would end marriage licensing in the state in an effort to resolve ongoing disputes over same-sex marriage. If SB 143 were to become law, couples would no longer have to seek permission to marry from a probate office and would instead file their own contracts with the state. The contract process does include some limitations. The 10th Amendment Center's Mike Meharry wrote, describing the limits on who would be able to file a marriage contract. Minors between the ages of 16 and 18 would have to obtain parental permission before marrying, which I personally don't agree with that, but that's a personal thing because I know a lot of 17, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds even, that already basically live on their own. So, again, we could get into that whole age when young adults should start becoming adults and be more responsible. We could get into that debate later. But it says here again, the state would not record a marriage if either party was already married and the parties would not be related by blood or adoption as already stipulated in state law. Under SB 143, the state would record same-sex marriages. Currently, Alabama state law does not force probate judges to sign off on every marriage, and following the Supreme Court ruling Obergefell versus Hodges, which found state-level bans on same-sex marriage unconstitutional, some officials have been refusing to issue marriage license to same-sex couples, claiming that to do so conflicts with religious beliefs. Bill sponsor Senator Greg Albritton, Republican from Range, told WSFA TV the left says, well, fine, let them resign. We'll force them to do it over their own objections. This bill fixes that problem. He added, marriage in our state has changed. We now are required to allow that to occur, so our laws have changed now. We need to bring our law in compliance with that. According to ABC News, bill opponent Representative Patricia Todd, Democrat from Birmingham, Alabama's only openly gay legislator, said the bill is unnecessary and that probate judges need to do their job. Truth and Media reported last year on a previous effort to pass the bill, which failed. This Patricia Todd and the only openly gay legislator who cares said the bill is unnecessary and that probate judges need to do. This takes that job away from them. They don't need to do that. That shouldn't even be their job. And she opposes it. Why does she oppose it? Because basically they want to force people that have the same beliefs as them into those positions and force the people that don't share their beliefs with them out of those positions. That's being discriminatory, to force people to go against their beliefs because they work for the government. Well, excuse me, but the whole gay thing and gay marriage thing is not old. It's more new than it is old at a national level. And you got people that have religious objections to it. That shouldn't even be their job. Marriage license should not even be the job of any government. And that's what they're saying. Now it's not. Now you write your marriage license up and you file it with the state. And they file it. So now you are married. Whatever your belief is. Now, again, they had those few little restrictions, which I don't agree with all of them. But it is what it is, and it's better than having this whole issue go on. So sorry, Patricia Todd of Birmingham. How about we remove a thing that shouldn't even be other people's responsibility? Your marriage, if you're gay or straight, should not be the business of the government or someone in a government position. And for you to force them to be engaged into your marriage is wrong. Forcing business owners to be engaged in something they believe is wrong is wrong. Doesn't mean I agree with them. Hey, listen, if I was a baker, I don't care who I'm selling to. As long as, you come with the money, I make what you need, you do with it what you want. Shoot, you can buy a cake to go film a stupid YouTube video and, blow it up. I don't care. That would be a business versus my personal belief. And I really don't have a opinion because it's not my life. People do with their life what they want. As long as they aren't harming other people, I really don't care. Don't force me to engage in something I don't want to be engaged in, and I'm not going to force you to be engaged in things I believe in when you don't. How about that? People, want to play this, we should force them to do these things. No. How about you just live your life, let them live their life, and leave it at that. I think that's probably the best bet. That way everybody can, focus on their own lives. But that's why a lot of times you also find a lot of people that are involved in a lot of these movements and protests because they want that division. That division makes you focus on something that's not effective. Let's say you're a gay couple and you want the state to be involved in your marriage. You're basically wanting to be involved with someone that may disapprove and think what you're doing is wrong, whether it is or not. That's their belief. Now, not only are you, forcing them to be, or trying to force them to be engaged in something that's your own private business, you're forcing yourself to be engaged with someone that doesn't maybe like you or believe in what you're doing. How is that productive for your life? Again, a lot of these people behind it are doing it to divide the country, to get you fighting each other instead of worrying about what they're doing to you. And I got one from AMTV from 3 days ago, and he covers George Soros engineers violent Donald Trump protests. And again, I don't support Donald Trump. I'm not going to go out there and, launch some campaign against him. I pointed out a lot of things I disagree or makes me very sketchy about the guy. But there's other people running that are just blatantly that, I couldn't ever support anything they do. And the thing is, though, they will use a lot of what Donald Trump says or does to divide and conquer people. And George Soros is known for putting a lot of money into organizations that tend to be behind demonstrations in the United States and abroad. So let's go ahead and get into this clip from AMTV, Christopher Green. George Soros engineers violent Donald Trump protests.
Visit our sponsor, American Survival Wholesale, for those in need. Call American Survival Wholesale today at 818-720-0759. That's 818-720-0759. Because the world isn't getting any safer. That's American Survival Wholesale. Worship, restoration, revival. Call now or click the link below. Hey everybody. I'm Christopher Green. You're tuning in to AMTV Alternative Media Television. It is good to be back. It is Monday, March 14th, 2016, and there was a massive protest with a lot of ensuing violence on, I believe it was Friday, at a Donald Trump rally in Chicago that had to be canceled due to all the occupiers on the ground. This is reminiscent of other protests that we've seen brewing this hateful, violent message.
Jim, what are we looking at right now? What are you saying?
Yeah. Yes, Aaron, I am off camera right now because I want to show you this. We've turned the camera around, panning around to the back of the arena. This is becoming violent. There is pushing and shoving going on inside this arena. People are throwing objects. Police are now escorting some protesters. We don't know if they're Trump supporters or protesters being led out of this arena right now. But just moments ago, a very large crowd of supporters, protesters, media. It was simply rocking back and forth. As my camera just panned back over, you could see this large section of protesters I was referring to earlier. They're now shouting, "Bernie, Bernie."
These libtards, these liberals being funded by organizations, people like George Soros and groups like MoveOn.org. They're asking to donate like $3 or something like that to the campaign to disrupt these kinds of events. Now, they say it's a peaceful disruption, even though it's not, even though it's violence being propelled by CNN and the mainstream media. It's funny, I was watching CNN. They had their cameras out. They're just like showing the violent protests, helping this violence basically and propelling this violence and this rage and this hate. And then blaming all of it on Donald Trump. That's the real interesting part of this. It's all these liberals on the ground creating all this violence, and then they're blaming it on Donald Trump, that he's the divisive figure. It's his divisiveness. They're calling him a misogynist, a xenophobic, all of these things. So The first thing you need to understand about this is all of this has been engineered, okay, by the power structure, by the establishment, in media, politics, religion. Again, I've been over this stuff ad nauseum. This ties in directly to the refugee crisis, another engineered event, pre-planned event, just like this violent, rage-filled protest was pre-planned at the Donald Trump speaking engagement on Friday, which he had to cancel. It's been pre-planned in Europe. It's been pre-planned at our border because it destabilizes nations. That's what this immigration crisis is. This is what people like George Soros are behind, destabilizing countries. You know, I'll get into arguments. People will be like, oh, well, these people can't come over, Christopher, and then vote. Bullshit. Yes, they can. There are loopholes in states like California, just one of them, where they come in, they end up getting driver's license through loopholes, and then they end up voting. So they can vote. They do vote. They do place their bid for people like Hillary Rodham Clinton in 2016, and this is why it's part of the agenda. Again, it destabilizes countries in Europe. It destabilizes our country here in the United States of America. Kasich spoke, one of the presidential candidates, over the weekend, said that within the first 100 days of his presidency, he would enact amnesty for up to 11.5, up to 12 million illegal immigrants here in the United States. He doesn't believe that we should send them all back and break apart families. Now, nobody's saying that that's, you know, a good or godly thing to do, to break apart families. But if we don't have borders, if we don't have a rule of law, then we don't have a country. Well, you see, that's the point, folks. They don't want us to have a country. That's the whole idea of this New World Order paradigm, this one world order government, is that it's borderless, that it's limitless. That's the very definition of a New World agenda, New World Order agenda, a New World Order government, a one world order government. They don't want us to have borders. Okay, this is a part of the agenda, which is why the refugee crisis has been engineered as a byproduct of U.S. intervention and destabilization efforts in parts of the Middle East, places like Iraq and Afghanistan and Yemen, and now most notably in Syria, all propelled by the West. Remember, the West lied about it, said that they didn't cause it. They weren't arming terrorists on the ground, even though they were. Now all this is declassified, even admitted by the Pentagon. Okay, we have been there for a reason, and as a result, we create the ensuing crisis that creates the millions of refugees that come over into countries and places like Paris that result in the Paris attacks and the bloodshed and murder of innocent civilians. Okay, it's been the same agenda here in the United States of America. So this is very Saul Alinsky-esque. This is Obamanoid-esque. This is Bill Ayers-esque, who was also protesting at this event, which is a giant red flag that just goes to show you, again, this was an engineered event. I mean, Obama was literally, his political life was birthed in the bedroom of Bill Ayers. I mean, we've had major figures like Andrew Breitbart, for example, point this out time and time again while he was still alive. You know, just about how this is a sinister Saul Alinsky community organizing agenda, and this is now what we're getting in the form of these hateful, violent protests coming from the liberal left that are destabilizing Donald Trump's campaign. It's not Donald Trump causing any of this. Again, this is engineered because they want to take Donald Trump out. I've spoken about this, again, ad nauseum, that Trump is real. He's legitimately a risk to the establishment. He is not the chosen figure. He is a real legitimate threat to the media establishment, to the political establishment, to the religious establishment, and it's why they're pulling out all the stops. It's why we're seeing these rage-filled, violent protests from the liberal left, organized, created by the mainstream media giants like CNN, to attempt to destabilize Donald Trump so that they can blame him and his campaign and hopefully take him out. I mean, you even have other GOP candidates, people like Ted Cruz, saying things like Donald Trump is responsible for the rhetoric of his campaign. Just basically saying Donald Trump is responsible for other people committing violent acts, which is total bullshit. You're not responsible for other people and their actions. Those people are responsible. But as a part of this, socialized, liberalized, bullshit society, these people never blame themselves for their own actions. They only blame other people. They'll blame the state. They'll blame government. They'll blame politicians, or they'll blame Donald Trump. So we've seen the full force and weight of this establishment really push against Donald Trump, and now they're blaming Donald Trump. Most notably, mainstream media, bullshit propaganda companies like CNN are blaming him and his divisive rhetoric for the violence that they're committing. that they're helping to propel. So CNN literally has blood on its hands. Quite literally, these liberals on the ground committing heinous and violent acts have blood on their hands. You know, again, it's not that it's not a difficult situation. It's not that it's some godly thing to break apart families. But if we don't have rule of law here in the United States, if we keep our borders wide open, we only accomplish the agenda of these people hijacking our country that want limitless, borderless countries. That's the agenda of people like George Soros. It's why he's funding through organizations like MoveOn.org and also backing people like Bernie Sanders, which is really a black mark on Bernie Sanders, that you've got the backing of George Soros. My God. I mean, probably the most evil person on the planet. But what I want to stress in this video, folks, and this should be obvious to all of you, this is engineered and pre-planned. Kind of like September 11th. I'll just throw that out there as well. Kind of like the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. Kind of like the attacks we've seen in Paris as a result of the refugee crisis. Kind of like these race events that Obama stamps his name on, whether or not it's Michael Brown or Trayvon Martin. This political rhetoric is being used by this political establishment to divide for a reason, to attempt to take out political leaders like Donald Trump, who is a real threat, again, to this establishment, who is a real threat to the political paradigm, the banking system itself. You know, people always want to point out to the fact that, you know, Donald Trump's rich. Yes, he's rich, but he is not a part of this corporate media establishment that controls global politics today. Yes, he runs corporations. Yes, he employs thousands of people. Yes, he's a billionaire, but he is not a part of this much bigger system that controls, through the propaganda message that makes up CNN, et cetera, this idea of control, this system that creates this illusion of a political system in mainstream society today. Again, there is no system. This right-left paradigm is an illusion, just like your freedom is an illusion, just like the banking system is an illusion. Donald Trump is not a part of that. That's what people need to understand. And this is just more proof to the pudding. This is just more evidence showing the sinister nature of these covert, now turning overt campaigns to destabilize them. Again, the Pope has come out on Donald Trump. We've seen the political establishment come out on Donald Trump. The GOP establishment comes out on Donald Trump. Mitt Romney comes out on Donald Trump. And now we have liberals, radical leftist liberals, hijacking our country, committing acts of violence at Donald Trump rallies and pit stops of speaking engagements that he's making, forcing him to shut down his campaign. I actually think it shows a lot of prudent action of Donald Trump, and he should be commended for canceling the campaign. He's trying to quell the violence, not create it. He's trying to make America great again. He's trying to unite this country. Because again, this country has been hijacked, as Andrew Breitbart used to talk a lot about, by the radical left, by these groups that make up. I think there's organic qualities, but also it's been funded by people like George Soros, events that have transpired even in recent years, like Occupy Wall Street. Not that it didn't come from an honest place, not that there wasn't some real organic elements of it, not that there's not some organic elements, again, with this, you know, in this divisive political realm now, but it's funded, engineered, and pre-planned by individuals like George Soros through organizations they create like MoveOn.org to destabilize candidates so they can put into power candidates that they finance. Again, there is no system in the United States of America today. There has been a hit placed on Donald Trump. Everybody, a part of this political one world government paradigm, is trying to take this guy out. And it's why this violence is being engineered by these very sinister, evil people. I'd like to hear what you think. Get this video out everywhere. Make it viral, hard-hitting it in your face. I'm Christopher Green, and click the link below to support our sponsor.
AMTV on YouTube. Go check them out. Also, amtvmedia.com. We know that, you know, whether it be Move On or Black Lives Matter, and a lot of the left, we know they do these things. Again, it's divide and conquer. Yes, Donald Trump isn't part of the establishment, but you could possibly argue that he wants his own establishment, by the way he talks. Now, by the way he talks and how he talks and what he says, that's, doesn't create violence. No, it does create animosity in some people, which then allows Soros to exploit that in these people that don't really critically think what they're doing. They don't have a really educated belief in what they're doing, emotion. And then again, I've also explained that, I think Donald Trump plays off of people's emotions too. People have pointed out a lot of Donald Trump supporters that they've been able to pick out that are racist, whether they're planted there. I hear the argument, oh, those are just plants, and, that's what that's about. Whether they are just plants or they are true supporters, a lot of the politicians aren't going to care if there's crazies supporting them. They might publicly say, oh, I don't want those type of people supporting me. But those people are supporting something they believe that person could do for them. Now, if Donald Trump is serious about this border thing and, cracking down real hard on border and not playing the BS game, okay, if he really is for that, you might have some racist people supporting him. Yeah, you'll probably find that. You'll also probably find National Socialists supporting that. There might be people on the fence between him and Bernie Sanders over what type of national control they want. There might be someone going, I want the national control over I think we need to take control over all the industries and stuff, but I think we also need to lock down our borders. I don't know who to go with. So, nationalism can come in many, many different forms and have cross beliefs between things that Bernie Sanders says and what Trump says. And then you have Hillary playing the same old Democratic game. I'm not a socialist like him. No, not like him. Like yourself. You're a whole different type of socialist. You have Cruz. I'm a conservative that's not like the others. And I'm not like Trump. No, you're kind of like the other Republicans. I really believe that Cruz is a wolf in sheep's clothing. Now, that doesn't mean that he hasn't done things that were constitutional and good, but I still don't trust him. I don't trust any of them. I didn't even trust Rand Paul that much, but with a small, very small belief that maybe he really embodies some of his father's beliefs, that he would be the only person I would probably get out of bed for. And I'm sitting at that whole George Carlin spot with the whole voting. It's to the point that I look at all the people to vote for, and it's like, yeah, anybody that gets out of bed to go vote, you're kind of to blame for whoever we get and whatever policies they do that abridge our freedom. So that's where I am on that. Okay. Let me see where we are here. Okay, we got a little over half hour, not much, but a little bit. Sorry, trying to move all my screens. Okay. Now, if I can get to this here. Okay, this is reality check. Trump says he'd kill terrorist families. Let's go ahead and cue this up here.
Been making headlines saying that if elected, he wouldn't just go after terrorists, he would kill their families. And while the media has been shocked by this, why weren't they outraged when President Obama actually did it? This is a reality check you won't see anywhere else.
I would be very, very firm with families. And frankly, that will make people think, because they may not care much about their lives, but they do care, believe it or not, about their families' lives.
That was Donald Trump insisting that he would be so tough on terror that if elected, he would kill terrorists and he would target their families as well. So while the media scrambles to demonize remarks about killing family members of terrorists, and by the way, they should, they seem to forget their collective silence when President Obama didn't talk about doing that. He actually did it. You probably don't recognize this man right here, but his name is Anwar al-Awlaki, an American-born Muslim cleric who at one time was invited to the Pentagon after 9/11 to talk about the role of Muslims in America. But al-Awlaki became increasingly angry at the U.S. government spying on Muslims in mosques, and he left the U.S. in 2004, and he traveled back to Yemen, where he became radicalized. See, the U.S. government called him an inspiration for the Fort Hood shooter, the failed underwear bomber, the failed Times Square bomber. On September 30th, 2011, President Obama ordered a drone strike that killed al-Awlaki along with another U.S. citizen. Plenty of you watching will say, so what? He was a terrorist. You wouldn't be concerned about the fact that al-Awlaki was a U.S. citizen who got no due process, but that's a discussion for another time. Because the point I want to make today is not about this man, al-Awlaki. It's actually about what happened 2 weeks later. Because 2 weeks after killing al-Awlaki, President Obama ordered a second drone strike. This one killed al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki. Who was he? Well, he too was a U.S. citizen. He was born in Denver, Colorado. He was not a member of al-Qaeda. He was not a militant. He had not lived with his father for over 2 years because Anwar al-Awlaki had gone into hiding. Abdul Rahman al-Awlaki was not at a terror training camp when he was killed on September 4th, 2013. He was at his second cousin's home, a cousin he had lived with while his father had been in hiding. In fact, this teenager was the son of a man the U.S. government had decided was an enemy, and yet he himself was not even on the president's kill list. What's worse, after killing that 16-year-old, the Obama administration justified the killing by essentially saying that he should have had a better father.
That's an American citizen that's being targeted without due process of law, without trial, and he's underage, he's a minor.
I would suggest that you should have a far more responsible father if they're truly concerned about the well-being of their children. I don't think becoming an al-Qaeda jihadist terrorist is the best way to go about doing your business.
So what you need to know is that when Donald Trump says he would kill the families of terrorists, members of the media point to the Geneva Convention, insisting that to kill terrorist families would be a war crime. And they certainly might be right. So why have they been so quiet when this president has actually done it? That's Reality Check. Let's talk about that tonight on Twitter.
Okay. And that was from truththemedia.com. It was a reality check with Ben Swan, CBS 46. Okay. Give me a second here. Now, again, the media, kind of like what Christopher Green was talking about, has been playing off of things that Donald Trump has been saying. But they really are ignoring that a lot of what Donald Trump said, he wants to do is things Obama's already doing. Again, when before Obama got into office, we had the anti-war left out there, and that anti-war left candidate. But when he gets into office, we see them get very silent. Well, start looking behind the organizations that were behind those anti-left people. Start looking to their funding. Find out who they're involved with. And you might get some answers there. Kind of like what happened with the modern day Tea Party. And I've talked about this multiple times. The modern day Tea Party. Have you ever heard who a lot of the so-called Tea Partyists claim is the start of the Tea Partyists? Let me see if I can find one here. Let me see here. I want to play a clip. Hey, my computer can't keep up with me right now or something. Uh-oh. Hopefully I didn't freeze it up here. I think I did. Let's try this again. I'm not finding the one I've seen. Okay, I'm not finding it, but they had come out and talked about, the modern day Tea Party was started back in, I think they say 09 or 2010. It came out of completely forgetting about 06, 07, 08. And just kind of to remind people, I want to play some 2007 clips.
Well, some local residents took part in a political tea party of sorts this morning, reenacting a part of American history. Today marks 234 years since the famous Boston Tea Party in 1773. That was the day colonists dumped tea into Boston Harbor in protest of British taxes. Today, supporters of the Republican presidential
Holding up
candidate Ron Paul
signs. This is Ron Paul Tea Party, Los Angeles.
Ron Paul supporters mark the 234th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party by reenacting the historic event right here in Austin. Lots of cheering as dressed-up tea partiers threw boxes overboard into Lady Bird Lake. The tea boxes were marked with different themes the presidential candidate is against, like the IRS and NATO. Similar grassroots
IMF.
Tea Party rallies took place in Boston and other
Iraq
cities.
War.
They marked the anniversary of the Boston Tea Party to rally for Republican presidential hopeful Ron Paul and call for a modern-day revolution. They raised millions in a single day online and gathered in Boston to make a statement.
Ron Paul becomes the $6 million man. That's the headline on Politico about the Republican presidential candidate's astounding fundraising accomplishment yesterday, the Boston Tea Party.
Online, Ron Paul fans who populate the websites and forums where you can actually follow along what they're trying to do to raise attention for this candidate. And now reaching into their pockets for a second time to record-breaking effect. And with the Ron Paul campaign at their website reporting they're up to over $18 million this quarter.
We are learning now of a rift in the movement behind the Tea Party protests planned for tomorrow around the country. In order to really understand this internal conflict, we actually have to go way back to 2007 in our cheap time machine. All right. In the Ron Paul for President campaign, a bunch of his supporters developed a plan to fly a giant Ron Paul blimp to Boston. When the blimp got to Boston, they were going to dump boxes of tea into the Boston Harbor. Is the real story here, is the more honest story here, that the Tea Parties are in fact the Republicans trying to run off with the Libertarians' idea?
Really quickly, who would have thought that Ron Paul would be the Republican presidential candidate with more influence on the Republican Party in 2010 than any of those other guys that we covered in 08? Not Fred Thompson, not Mitt Romney, not John McCain, but Ron Paul, godfather of the Tea Party movement.
Town. Has Ron Paul succeeded in changing or moving the political debate after 25 years of being in public life?
I say this with amazement, but it's becoming more and more clear that we live in the age of Ron Paul, Judge. I mean, you stop and think about it. Who's the father of the Tea Party? It's Ron Paul. Not only is he the father of the Tea Party that won the majority of the House for Republicans in the 2010 midterms, but he's the father of so much of the discussion about the budget, about the debt ceiling, about taxes right now. This is the age of Ron Paul.
Supporters of Congressman Ron Paul back in December 2007, celebrating the 234th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party with rallies across the nation and an online money bomb that raised millions of dollars for Ron Paul's presidential bid in 2008. Congressman Ron Paul's candidacy was arguably the spiritual godfather of what's now become the Tea Party movement. Joining us now is Dave Weigel, the senior reporter for the Washington Independent.
I kind of got misty-eyed looking at those old Tea Party videos. I was at one in 2007 in Georgetown where Ron Paul activists put things like Federal Reserve and unsound money on boxes and then jumped and smashed the boxes after they threw them on the floor. So they really did invent all this stuff.
Which one of these guys gets the lion's share of the libertarian dollars and passion, frankly?
Oh, I think Ron Paul. I mean, there's one thing about Ron Paul is he was kind of the godfather of the Tea Party. And
conservatives will gather across the country the day that taxes are due this week to protest President Obama and taxes. They're calling the protests tea parties, as you may have heard. They have been warming up to the idea by mailing tea bags to Washington. Is there some Ron Paul revolution in the teabagging, do you think?
It's funny. They really did come up with the concept of the Tea Party. In 2007, actually, is when they started referring to some of their events as tea parties. It is curious, though, as you point out, they do not use the verb tea bag.
Look, you Tea Party people, here he is, right? You guys need somebody out there to be a point man. I know they don't like that. They like to be decentralized. But I think Toss will be the good guy.
Ron Paul.
Like how Stossel kind of, you have Ron Paul and Bill O'Reilly's hand kind of came down a little bit there. But I wanted to point this out because I want people to look where we are today. Look where this election cycle is right now. Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, the Hillary Clinton, Ted Cruz. Old establishment versus revolutionary establishment. But none are talking the way Ron Paul was talking. Most of those supporters right now should be outraged. I know a lot of old Ron Paul supporters, old Tea Partyists from 06, 07, 08. I know a lot of those people are now considering themselves full-fledged anarchist libertarians that don't engage. Wonder why. If Ron Paul was younger and he came in running, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, I think would have been dwarfed. If he had the same, if Ron Paul could have had the type of campaign and the type of support from the grassroots like he did in 06, 07, he could do it. People forget sometimes because of what happened that last election Ron Paul ran. Why didn't he get the support he got before? I think a lot of it has to do with the people running his campaign. I do believe that. There are people that right now wouldn't probably stand behind him. If he could have had the same campaign that he ran in 06, 07, and 08, that should have been his same campaign that he ran. It really should have been, because he would have been able to probably win. He didn't have to do anything. Think of what he was able to accomplish in not a lot of time by not even having to do anything, because the people supported him. They supported his message. There were grassroots events. He went to the grassroots events. What happened last election cycle? Oh, his campaign basically kept him closed off from a lot of his supporters. When you have libertarians out there talking a libertarian message, And it's based on exactly all the stuff that Ron Paul goes out there talking about. And you basically shun them from the events. And they also have a large following. In that large following, you know, good 80% of them or more are also Ron Paul supporters, and they see that. When they know, hold on, last time he ran for president for the 08, those were people talking at the events that he was at. I've been following him. He talks the libertarian message. Why is he being shunned? A lot of the people running Ron Paul's campaign in the last election cycle, I think, screwed him. Royally screwed him. We know what happened at the RNC. We know what the GOP establishment did to Ron Paul. If he would have had all that support behind him, instead of those people being shunned, he probably would have won it. No matter that, he would have done what Trump's doing now. But look at where we are now compared to 06 and 07, when we actually had, you know, enthusiasm. Now we just have hatred. You know, these people were like pumped up and peaceful. Enthusiastic, energetic, and peaceful. Well, all these other people are pumped up, and both sides are not peaceful. Emotions, hatred, anger. The smear campaign that goes on against Trump or Hillary or Bernie or Ted Cruz is hit and miss. A lot of times, the smear campaign that happened to Ron Paul came from everywhere. And then they would go back and go, oh, well, yeah, you were right. And, you know, how did you predict that? But you're wrong about the future. Because this new fix is going to be better. And he's going, it's not a new fix. It's just another, you know, basic moving it down the line. You're not fixing anything. Because you really haven't changed any policy. We are getting here towards the end. And hopefully I can get to this last one here. Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out here. Okay, let me see. Hopefully it didn't get moved too far down. Okay. This one, it has to deal with the whole encryption in Apple and all that. this one out of Infowars.com by Kurt Nimmo. Engineers threaten to quit if FBI forces government OS on Apple. Encryption is a front line against the surveillance state. Engineers and programmers told the New York Times on Thursday they will give up their jobs if the government forces Apple to undermine encryption on its devices. If the government tries to compel testimony or action from these engineers, good luck with that, a former Apple engineer manager told the newspaper. Wendell Snyder, a former Apple senior product manager, said if the government attempts to force them to work on something that's outside their personal values, they can expect to find a position that's a better fit somewhere else. Simply refusing to code the new operation system while employed at Apple would not be an option. If engineers did this, according to Joseph DeMarco, a former federal prosecutor, the government would be much more likely to find Apple in contempt and impose heavy fines. The Times cites the case of LavaBit, an encryption email service used by former NSA contractor Edward Snowden. In 2013, the government issued a warrant demanding the company surrender private encryption keys, allowing it to read Snowden's email. After the company refused, a judge imposed a $10,000 a day penalty. Instead of paying the penalty, the company ceased operations. FBI does not need keys to read iPhones. The federal government has cited the All Writs Act from the 18th century to force Apple to unlock two phones linked to the alleged San Bernardino killers, allowing the attack. Verizon provided the FBI with data from the phones allegedly used by Syed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, including calls, locations, MSS messages, and internet data. The FBI probably knows everything that Farouk and Malik were in contact with. The FBI probably know everything of interest already. If there was a hint of any connection with a terrorist organization, they would have announced it already. They have instead been clear that there was nothing suggesting any such contact took place, an information security researcher wrote in February. According to former White House cybersecurity czar Richard Clark, the government has the ability to crack the passcode of Farouk's iPhone 5C. Clark said on March 14 he would have told FBI Director James Comey to call Fort Meade and the NSA would have solved this problem, every expert I know believes the NSA can crack this phone. He said the government is not serious about gaining access to the phones, but they just want the precedent. No, they want the remote access. Encryption, the front line against surveillance state. The government is mostly concerned that someday down the line, ubiquitous encryption will take hold. That is strong encryption by default that would be time consuming for the spooks to crack on an independent basis, writes Lauren Weinstein. The rise of ubiquitous encryption will over time likely be unstoppable. Following Obama's call for government access to all devices during the South by Southwest Festival in Austin last week, InfoWars reported on the rise of encrypted apps. A number of apps, Wire, Telegram, WhatsApp, Text Secure, and others provide end-to-end encryption. The system allows only those engaged in communication to read messages and prevents others from gaining access to the cryptographic keys needed to decrypt conversations, including telecom providers, ISPs, the company operating the messaging service, and the government. And again, big supporter of encryption if you use electronic mobile devices or any really electronic device, your computer or whatever. Now, if you're going to do a lot of researching, again, VPNs, Tor server, things like that are really good tools to use. Search engines, instead of Google, try things like startpage.com. It's a secure search. That way Google doesn't have your IP address on record for searching terms that you might want to research. A lot of people feel like they don't want to research anything the government does because they'll track them. Well, Google might not be giving it to the government, but they have possession of what you search on their search engine and the IP address. So VPNs, Tor network, things like that, start page, disconnect me. It's one of those things that it's just tools to use to keep your personal life private. You know, we just don't see that much anymore. You know, I have older people talk about it all the time to me, you know, man, the level of privacy has just went down the toilet. We don't, everything you do is tracked anymore. They say, you know, they don't even feel they can sit in their living room without being watched. I tell them, well, if you have a smart TV, you might not, or any type of camera device that's wireless or internet connected, you're not. So we just need to take steps to secure that, and we do have people out there making that possible. And like LavaBit, he refused to do it and shut down his service. The thing is, he was also one of the engineers, I believe, of that whole encryption thing. They're talking about anyone that works there would quit. Now, that would leave Apple in a position that they might be a little screwed. We are coming up to the end of the broadcast tonight. I want to urge people to go to ucy.tv. There's a support tab at the top. Click that if you could, and donate a little bit to UCY to keep this platform for me and the other host here. UCY does this for us, and basically has built a network that now with TuneIn app and things like that can reach worldwide, and the information to give to people to increase freedom in their lives is crucial, definitely in the times we live in. So don't forget to do that. There's also Amazon tab down towards the bottom. Click that, shop Amazon through ucy.tv, and you get the same great prices, and UCY gets a little kickback. And also don't forget to check out antityrannynews.com/mypatriot. My Patriot Supply has all kinds of great offers, including non-GMO seed vaults, herb vaults, and a lot of great prepping gear. So go check them out too, and that helps this broadcast here on UCY Anti-Tyranny News Radio. When you do that, you get something, we get something, and you're getting great gear from My Patriot Supply. Again, thank everybody for tuning in tonight, and stay tuned here on UCY.TV for all the great broadcasts coming up next. And I'll catch you guys Wednesday. Sorry I had power outage, and last week I was kind of running around all of Indiana. So thanks again for tuning in. Stay tuned here on UCY.TV.